religious-based empire. That also was a very radical view for that era. And led to, as I mentioned earlier, the first republic in a Muslim country. And it led to this idea of citizenship. Everybody can think of themselves as a part of this nation, a valuable, integral contributor to Turkey. And finally, devletçilik, statism. During that period, there was no capital. There was no private capital in Turkey. There weren't institutions, there weren't corporations or banks that had a lot of money to invest in national development programs. That meant the state had to do it. So the state was going to take on responsibility for not only defining the vision of what Turkey should become, but providing the manpower, the woman power, and the finances that would make this real. So those were Atatürk's version, I think, of what we now call the Millennium Development Goals for the world. And these are the principles that created the success of modern Turkey. Atatürk showed that it's not enough to have a vague dream. You need to systematize your goals. And that's one thing that I think ties in very closely to the MDGs. Atatürk was truly a child of the Enlightenment. He was a believer in science and in reason, in rationality. I love this quote: "For everything in this world, for civilization, for life, for success, the truest guide is knowledge and science." In other words, let's anchor ourselves in the real world. Let's accept what scientists are discovering, what we are learning from learned people. Let's not be chained to old ideas when science is teaching us new ones. Perhaps one of Atatürk's most interesting concepts, too, was his realization that times not only were changing during his lifetime, but that times would continue to change after his lifetime. You know, Atatürk did something that powerful authoritarian rulers rarely in history have done. And that is, after being in power for a number of years, although he maintained himself as president of Turkey, he essentially withdrew from power. And he allowed the next generation to begin to emerge. He did not insist that everything that he decided was important for Turkey in the 1920s and 30s be etched in stone. In fact, this is the other quote of his that I think is so relevant for our discussion. Before his death, Atatürk said, "I am leaving behind no sermon, no dogma, nor am I leaving as my legacy any commandment that is frozen in time or cast in stone." Now, as the world changed after Atatürk's death, the United Nations emerged as a powerful institution, and it adopted its own framework for achieving the goals in the world that Atatürk wanted to achieve in Turkey. And that became the Millennium Development Goals. Briefly, they are these modest goals: eradicate poverty, extreme poverty and hunger, universal primary education, gender equality, reducing child mortality, improving maternal health, fighting HIV/AIDS, environmental sustainability, and the last one we talked about, global partnership for development. So those, to me, are the 6 arrows of the modern age. There is a tremendous link between these two lists. One list of 6 developed in the 1920s, one list of 8 developed much more recently. Here are some of the links I see. First, look, one of the first is idealism. You have to be able to dream. You have to want what's really good for people. However, you must institutionalize your idealism. So this partnership between idealism and institutions, I think, is something that Atatürk taught us. Another thing that was definitely a characteristic of Atatürk was impatience. He always wanted to get things done faster than they could possibly be done. In fact, I think this might have been one of the factors that contributed to his early death. He was operating at such a speed. He was always frustrated. He was never happy with the amount of progress that he could reach. One of my favorite Atatürk stories happened, is about the time when Atatürk decided they should change the Turkish language, that they should stop using Arabic script. which Atatürk generously described as indecipherable symbols. And we should move to the Roman alphabet. So he convened a meeting of the philologists and linguists in Turkey. There cannot have been very many of them. And he told them this project. Essentially, I want you to transliterate the entire language. I want you to purge out many words. I want you to change the sound. He listed what he wanted. And then he asked them, take 24 hours among yourselves and discuss how long this would take you. How much time will you need to invent a new language? They came back the next day and they told them that if they had no other responsibilities like teaching or writing or speaking at conferences, they would be able to do this in 6 years. And Atatürk's answer was, fine, you have 6 months. He later wrote that he had already decided before the meeting that however many years they asked for, that's how many months he was going to give them to do it. So impatience is a great quality that I think Atatürk possessed to excess. Another quality that I think links Atatürk to the Millennium Development Goals is outrage at injustice. Everywhere Atatürk looked, he saw things that angered him, just the way that all of us feel when we look around the world and see the excruciating circumstances that too many people live in. Also, you have to believe in your heart that radical change is possible. You can't give up. If Atatürk had been more realistic and modest, Turkey wouldn't be what it is today. It's the audacity to dream huge dreams that was Atatürk's great quality, and that certainly is reflected in the Millennium Development Project. Also, another link between them is that the development of Turkey towards a modern republic in the Kemalist era is tied to the Millennium Development Goals in the sense that they are not meant to dictate to other countries. They are merely meant to set an example and pull other countries by the strength of this example. Nobody is going around the world and forcing nations to do anything with the Millennium Goals. The United Nations has provided this framework. It's up to governments to decide whether they want to do it. Atatürk also made a remarkable decision after he became the president of Turkey, and that was to turn inward. Turkey did not have an active foreign policy during that period, and I think there were two reasons for that. First of all, the country was in desperate need of development, and Atatürk wanted to use all of his energies to develop his own country. And second, I think he was very conscious of the fact that there were fears that he would try to recreate something like the Ottoman Empire. And he wanted to make clear that this was not Turkey's ambition and that Turkey was very happy inside its own borders. Nonetheless, the Turkish example did not just start influencing other people in the last 10 years. While Atatürk was alive, he attracted the attention of statesmen from other countries who drew on his example. The King of Afghanistan was a great admirer of Atatürk and brought a number of, actually it was one of the few countries that Turkey sent aid to during the Kemalist era. You can see Jinnah in Pakistan, another leader who greatly admired Atatürk and made actually a great effort to make Pakistan something like what Turkey became. Had he not been assassinated at a relatively early age, and had Pakistan not turned into another direction, Pakistan would have been much more like Turkey than it is today. And of course, another great example is Iran. Reza Shah, who was the great reformer in Iran, did everything after Atatürk did it. You can almost trace every major reform in Iran. It happened 1 year after Atatürk did it in Turkey. And in fact, although Atatürk never left Turkey after becoming president, Reza Shah made one trip out of Iran. And that was, he wanted to go and see how countries that were more advanced were dealing with social problems. So he had this plan to go to Turkey, and then he was going to go on to Europe, to examine how other countries were developing. After he got to Turkey, he decided, Iran is so far behind Turkey, I don't even want to go to Europe. Let me just concentrate on trying to bring Iran up to the level of Turkey. And the fact that Iran is in many ways a much more modern country than many of the countries around it is largely due to the reforms that were implemented in Iran as a result of what had happened in next door Turkey. So for all these reasons, I believe that the insight that Bircan Hanem had of trying to tie Atatürk's ideology with the ideology behind the Millennium Goals is brilliant. There really is an intimate connection. In fact, it's hard to imagine a leader of the 20th century who produced a list of goals for his country that was closer to what the United Nations produced almost a century later. I said earlier that Atatürk went into a kind of semi-retirement in his last few years of his life. Of course, the United Nations did not exist then. If it did exist, if it had existed, I think I have the perfect job that Atatürk could have taken after deciding he didn't want to be the active president of Turkey anymore. He would have come to the United Nations and become the director of the Millennium Development Goals Project. And he would have been our main speaker here today. Thank you very much.